Hey, welcome everybody. Glad you guys woke up for us this morning. We want to welcome Todd on with us. Super excited to have you with us, Todd.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It's good seeing everybody.
Definitely a pleasure on our side to have you with us to talk with our goalkeepers and to showcase just your wealth of knowledge around this position. The way we'll run this is Todd's going to take about 10-15 minutes to go over a topic. The topic that we talked about was goalkeeper size and the different attributes needed. Todd, how tall are you?
I'm about 6'3".
6'3". So you're right on the cusp of the taller side of the goalkeeper world. And Todd's worked with goalkeepers of all sizes, including obviously the number one that comes in everybody's mind is Nick Raimondo, and just very different compared to what you usually see out of a goalkeeper. And so having your feedback of working with him and other keepers of different sizes will be awesome, just to learn about the attributes that come with your size. I know we have some keepers on here on the taller range. We have some keepers on here on the shorter range. And so learning those different sides will be awesome. So after Todd goes, then we'll open it up to you guys for questions. So as he's talking to you, be thinking about questions as well. We want to get plenty of questions. We want you guys to get feedback on things that you can work on. If you find yourself on one side or the other of the size equation or things that you struggle with, be thinking about those things during it so that when we get to that point, we have questions ready for him and we can maximize our time on here. So what I'll do, Todd, is I'll just spotlight you so you're on our main camera.
Okay.
And you should be ready to go.
Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share my screen if that's all right with you guys.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to kind of go over real quickly, and this is going to be very, very brief. Just this one slide from our goalkeeper curriculum. So these is what I call our DNA. You know, it says RSL goalkeeper DNA, but I'll be very, very honest. This has nothing to do really with RSL. For me personally, this is kind of the DNA of any goalkeeper, whether they're part of RSL, they're part of LAFC, or they're part of United. You know, these are attributes that I think every goalkeeper coach is looking for their goalkeepers. So I don't want to talk too much about the psychological and the tactical and the technical and the social and that kind of stuff. You know, obviously the whole point of this conversation is more of the physical attributes, you know, and we're talking, you know, especially around size. So I know I myself am not a big proponent of size. You know, and that was prior to me ever coming to Real Salt Lake. Obviously with Nick Raimondo, you know, he's about 5'9" when he's got studs on. He's not a very big guy. But he also covers the goal very, very well. He's arguably the best goalkeeper that MLS has ever seen. He holds every record that MLS has in the goalkeeping department as well. So that kind of tells me there that size doesn't always matter. Does it help? You know, does it help to be 6'5" and you can cover the goal and you can come out for crosses and you can still get down to those balls that are pinged right outside your feet? Yes, that's kind of that ideal thing. Yes, we would all love that. Bigger, stronger, faster, better. But that doesn't always pan out. For example, say you're 6'5". If you're 6'5", where are the most difficult saves for that tall goalkeeper? Typically those low ones right outside their feet, right? That's typically the weakness. Well, what if you happen to be 6'5", but you're unable to deal with that ball? In my opinion, you are just as bad as that smaller stature goalkeeper that can't get up for that cross. So there's a weakness in both sides, correct? Whether you're 6'5", there's a weakness. There's a weakness if you're 5'8" and have the inability to get out and deal with the cross or cover your goal or have a range to get into that top corner if needed. So there's strengths and weaknesses on both sides. So I know from my experience, you know, prior to me coming to RSL, I was heavily involved with the federation, primarily on the women's side. And I argued back and forth with U.S. Soccer. They actually had a mandate that they were trying to propose that in the women's game, if you are not 5'10", you are never going to play for the national team. And my argument was, well, what about that 5'9.5" goalkeeper that has every other attribute that's better than the 5'10"? What is U.S. soccer going to do? Their argument was, well, we're going to take the 5'10". I looked at him and I said, you're crazy, because you're missing out on a goalkeeper, maybe like a Nick Rimando, a John Bush, all the smaller stature, or in the international game, a Kasper Schmeichel. Kasper Schmeichel is not a very big goalkeeper, but he's playing in the Premier League. You know, if all of a sudden we just look at size as being the end all, we're going to miss out potentially on a goalkeeper that maybe is a little bit smaller, but is blowing out of the water all the other attributes. So, for example, if you look at the psychological, the tactical, the technical, and the social, say, for example, all those other attributes that we're looking for, that goalkeeper is totally off the charts. Off the charts in every other aspect, but they're 5'9". Does that mean all of a sudden they can't play? No, they're making up for their lack of a physical attribute, which is their size. And in my opinion, as long as you're able to figure out, okay, what's my weakness? And in this particular instance, that weakness is probably, we're talking about size, potentially. If that's my weakness, I've got to make sure that I'm making up for every other element in my game to make up for that lack of size. In the opposite direction, if you're 6'5" and maybe you're not as mobile, all right, that's just as bad of a weakness. But we have to have the ability to look at ourselves and say, what are all the other aspects of my game? And how can I make sure that I improve in that aspect, but I'm totally off the charts in all the other aspects? All right, to making sure that that lack of size or that I'm maybe too big isn't going to be a hindrance into my game. For me, that's the biggest attribute. And if you look at Nick Rimando, and obviously he's the folk hero in this area that you all know of and have probably seen him play many, many times. What can you guys tell me about Nick Rimando? What are some of his strengths? And what are some of his strengths that he is so good at, it probably made up for his lack of size? Is there anything that you guys can maybe pick out? What I'm saying about excelling and being off the charts in other areas, what's one area that he was maybe off the charts? Anyone?
His positioning.
Positioning, yep, very, very good. What else? Communication. What else?
I would think like all the social, that whole bottom section is just like an outstanding leader.
Yep. He had a very big presence, didn't you? You always knew he was involved in the game. All right. What else? What was another area? What was he very good at when the ball was where? At his feet, right? He arguably had the best foot skills from a goalkeeper that we've ever seen in this league. He was completely off the charts in that realm. All right. So he had the ability to be able to not care about a ball being passed back to him. He was very, very comfortable on the ball. All right. What else? Because I certainly think that Nicky had a pretty good range too. Maybe not off the cross as much as some others. All right. But when I'm saying range, what kind of range do you think I'm talking about? Not range maybe coming off your line, but range where? What about shots into the corners?
Explosiveness. He had range to reach the top.
Yeah, very explosive, right? So, in other words, what I'm trying to get at is, was Nick Rimando 6'5"? No. But did he have the ability to play like he was 6'5"? That's the key, in my opinion, when we're talking about size of a goalkeeper or lack thereof of a goalkeeper. You know, do you have the ability, if you're 5'9", to be able to play like you're 6'5", and have that confidence in your game to play like you're 6'5"? Have that presence in your game to play like you're 6'5". And that's something that a player, and for obvious reasons, somebody that's kind of in your backyard, you know, a Nick Rimando, we can use as the perfect example. and there's a laundry list of other goalkeepers out there. One that you guys might know very well of from the international game that's an American is Casey Keller. Casey Keller is not a big guy. I think Casey was maybe 6 foot, but played in the Premier League, just like a Kasper Schmeichel. So Casey Keller, though, had a massive, when you talk about the social aspect, he was completely off the charts in the social aspect. You talk about a leader, you talk about a presence. He was a borderline arrogant person, but a very, very good goalkeeper. And that's one of those aspects that can kind of carry you if you don't have that big 6'5" massive frame that we all look and think that the goalkeeper should be in the modern game. And it's not always the case. So I know from my own personal experience, obviously I had a size to me, but many of you don't know, I came from a little town called New Holland, Pennsylvania. So if you've ever heard of the Amish, all right, most of you probably have heard of the Amish. I come from one of the biggest Amish cultures in the entire country. So can you imagine me playing soccer? Now, again, I'm not Amish. Don't think I'm Amish, but I came from that community. The abuse that I used to get, oh, you're Amish, you're not going to make it. That, to me, was my fuel. As soon as somebody said, you know what, you're Amish, you're this, no soccer players come from Lancaster County, you're not going to make it. To me, that was my fuel. I know in my conversations with Nicky, he had the same exact type of scenario. It wasn't about where he was from, though. It was about what he was and the size that he was. And he used that, and he would tell me, he's like, that was my fuel. He's like, everybody would tell me I'm never going to make it. And he wanted to prove people wrong. And I think, again, you look at that social and that psychological aspects, off the charts in that regard. Wasn't going to take no for an answer. Somebody said you're not good enough. That was his fuel. And again, his was a size type of thing. So I think if you guys, my recommendation at your young aspiring ages and developing, and it looks like, just from looking at some of you, we've got a wide variety of an age range, some younger than others, some older than others. We're all going to be different sizes, shapes, abilities, all that kind of thing. We're not looking to try to create the cookie cutter goalkeeper. We're looking at what attributes fit you best and how can you excel at those attributes based on your physical components and your mental components, all that kind of thing, and shape you into being the best goalkeeper you can be, regardless of your size in this particular case. So I think that's something that you definitely really need to kind of take to heart, and just make sure in all these different types of attributes that you kind of see here, if you're lacking in one area, whether it's size or maybe it's technical ability, and I'll use a example of Brianna Scurry. Some of you might remember Brianna Scurry was our national team goalkeeper for years. Brianna Scurry couldn't catch a cold. From a technical standpoint, she was very, very poor. But very similar to Nicky, in all the other attributes, athleticism, the social, very strong, all the other attributes, she was completely off the charts. So I think for us, it's recognizing what our weakness maybe it is. Are we able to strengthen that weakness? Obviously, we're not going to be able to physically get us taller, all right, or shrink us, but making sure that we make up for whatever that weakness is and excel even more in the other areas. So for me, that's the biggest key, that when we're talking specifically about size, make sure you're making up for your lack of size or making up for your mobility, because sometimes if we are taller, we're not as mobile, and making sure we're definitely excelling in a lot of those other areas. So that's kind of in a nutshell, Brandon, what I was going to kind of propose to you guys. I'm sure you guys might have some questions for me. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. But this one slide, I thought kind of nailed it on the head a little bit when we're talking about those physical components. It's not just about the physical components. and what your size is or lack thereof.
That's awesome, Todd. I appreciate that. The slide is perfect. My one question, and I'm going to open it up to the rest of the group. I'm going to go with one question to start it off. Because a lot of these attributes kind of take form in a coach's eye over time. So with a goalkeeper who is shorter, what are some things that they can do early on? Say you're going to a tryout, and it's a first time of a coach seeing you, so they don't get to really see the social side. What are some of the things that they can do early on to kind of showcase themselves if they are a shorter? Because there is just that mindset as soon as you see a shorter goalkeeper that they're not quite looked at the same way early on. Now, there's a lot of attributes like you talked about that stand out. But what are some things early on? So let's say the guys that are on, they have tryouts this year, probably going to be in June. When they step out to tryouts and are seen for the first time, what are some key areas for a coach?
That's a great question. I think the first things that come to my mind are quick feet, positioning, how clean are your hands, and do you have a big presence? And the presence is that communication factor. So those are kind of those 4 keys that when I'm looking and evaluating a goalkeeper, that I want to see what are their feet like. Because if you've got really good feet, and I'm not talking about on the ball. Yes, we want to be able to deal with the ball at our feet. I'm talking about your movement. How quickly can you move ground and cover ground from point A to point B? How well do you position yourself in goal? Are you keeping yourself in connection with your back 4? If a ball is being prepared, outside the box, where are you located within your goal? Because depending on your size is going to be a big determining factor of where are you? Are you retreating to your line? Are you coming out? Big and strong? Do you have really, really clean hands? Because at that next level, it's about making sure you have good, solid hands. Because I was on a call yesterday, and we talked a lot about, when you're talking into that as quote-unquote next levels, whether it's the college game, the pro game, the game gets faster and players around you get better. At our level, if we bobble a ball and it goes out for a corner on a ball that we should have probably held, now we've got to deal with somebody like a Carlos Vela that's whipping a ball inside the box. And those are opportunities that we want to try to strive to prevent as opposed to kind of enhance. Carlos Vela is not a pretty sight to be whipping in a ball in a corner. And now their big center backs are coming forward. And then that last piece is just presence. Having that commanding body and voice to be able to control your penalty area. Those are kind of the 4 attributes that I kind of look for if I was in a college game and I was recruiting a goalkeeper, and it's the same thing here that I'm looking for in a pro goalkeeper that I'm going to recruit to RSL.
Awesome. Okay, guys, it's your turn now. So questions, pop them out.
This is the tough part of the day. I'll tell you what, when I was a young boy, my dad said something to me at a very, very early age, and it stuck with me to this day, and I'm 48 years old. Well, not quite. I'm 47. 2 weeks, and I'm 48. The only dumb question is the question you don't ask. So there are no dumb questions. So if you've got a question, concern, whatever, this is your chance. There are no dumb, foolish questions.
All right, I got one.
Okay.
Okay, so I haven't hit my growth spurt yet, and is there a specific technique that stands out more than others that can set me apart?
I think the biggest thing that I would, if you haven't hit that growth spurt, the biggest thing that I would probably tend to suggest for you to work would be is your speed and agility, your general athleticism. Because what's going to happen is you're going to hit a growth spurt in a week, 2 months, 6 months, a year, and you might grow 3, 4, 5 inches in a short amount of time. And what's going to happen? You're going to lose coordination of all your body. the more coordinated and agile you are going into that growth spurt, the easier the time you're in that growth spurt is going to be. So I would definitely really strive a lot and work a lot on like little fast feet, little exercises in and around cones, in and around poles, little jumping, little exercises, just to work on your agility and movement and coordination type of thing. Because that's, and myself, Brandon, I'm sure he would, say this as well. It's the number one thing that we find when kids go into that growth spurt. It's all of a sudden you look at them and you're like, what happened to this player? It's like they went from being super agile to now they're like a baby giraffe and they're all over the place. And I think the best way to combat that is to make sure you're super, super agile before you get into that growth spurt. And then as you're in that growth spurt, keep continuing to do it, because it's going to be a narrower window for you to be able to deal with that growth spurt, in my opinion.
All right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No questions of, does Nick have any pets, or what's Nikki's favorite color or anything like that?
I have one. What is like a good thing that you can do for reaction time?
Ooh, that's a great question. Man, there's a ton of exercises you can do for reactions. I like to use triggers myself personally. And what I mean by maybe a trigger is if you look at, say, a static exercise where maybe you're receiving a volley here, now you got to turn and you got to do a volley somewhere else. I like to do a trigger where instead, or it could be you're facing one way and you got to turn and deal with a shot or deal with a volley in another direction. I like to make them think about something and using, say, a trigger. So it could be as simple as holding a ball, or somebody holding a ball and you're facing them and they drop a ball and now you got to quickly catch it before you move and turn. So it just adds a little bit of that element of they can't move too early. They've got to only react and turn on that ball drop. So they've got to focus. Now they got to catch it. Now they got to turn. And that's kind of very similar in replicating what the game is, where you're not going to move to deal with a ball before it's passed. Does that make sense? So it's kind of ingraining that stay focused in one area. You got to deal with this situation. Boom. Now you got to turn and move. I like little triggers like that. And it could be a drop ball. It could be a pass ball. And then the movement happens. There's other things that I really like to do is there's a lot of little rebounder types of things. I know for me, if you don't have little rebounders, we have a big mechanism at our training ground. I forget what it's called. It might even be called the deflector or something like that. And it's about 6 to 8 feet wide, about 4 or 5 feet high. And it's got ropes across and ropes down. And then there's like little, you know what I mean by little boat buoys? If you go to dock your boat, there's these little tiny buoys that kind of like they're little bumpers. Well, on the ropes, occasionally there's these little buoys. So if you volley, half volley, strike a ball through this mechanism, sometimes it goes right through and sometimes it hits one of the buoys and deflects off. So it starts to work on your reactions a little bit. We use a lot of that. Sometimes I've actually built little things on the ground that I place all around that are like little knobs. And if we do what we call skitter, for example, skitters if I little half volley right along the ground. And now it might hit one of these things, boom, and deflect somewhere. And now the goalkeeper's got a force to react. So those are a couple little quick little things that we like to do on a daily basis to work on some of that deflection, or reaction type of things where it's going to deflect and we got to deal with the situation.
Cool.
And you can do that very easily. I mean, most of you have cones, It could be something as simple where you lay in a dozen cones out in front of you and somebody hits a ball, on the floor, whether it's a skitter or it's a little pass. and hits the cones. It might deflect a little bit, but imagine if there's a dozen cones and the ball rolls across the cones, what's going to happen to the cones? Cones are probably going to jump all over the place, right? From a visual stimulation standpoint, is that going to stimulate your brain? Because all of a sudden, what's your brain going to probably focus on? The cones flopping all over the place. And yet, what do we want to strive to focus on? The cones or the ball?
The ball.
Yeah, we want to focus on the ball. So it might not necessarily deflect a little bit, but we're working visually on those eyes to train those eyes to stay on the ball, regardless what's happening around it. So you can still work on that reaction, so to speak. And reactions to me is all visual. It's can you be able to see it, and how quickly can you pick something up and be able to deal with it, with the deflective situation. So very simple. Guys can do that in your backyard. But good question. Anybody else?
I have one. So crosses and corner kicks when you're coming out, and the box is really crowded. Sometimes I find myself like having a hard time getting myself in the space I need to be to attack the ball.
Okay.
What would you say are like drills or techniques, or just any advice for that sort of thing?
That's a great question. And my answer is going to be very, very simple. And you kind of answered a little bit of it within your question. So when I look at crosses, it's the number one weakness in youth goalkeeping. And if I asked you guys the question, how many crosses do you guys face in the course of a week in your training session? What would the answer be? Anyone? Would you say limited versus maybe diving saves you make or volleys that you save? Would you say it's a much smaller percentage, right? Okay. The second part of that question, when are you guys typically dealing with crosses? Would you agree with me that most of the time you guys deal with crosses are you're playing live, full simulated matches, whether it's 7v7, 8v8, in a small-sided activity, a crossing and finishing exercise, all right? But those are live situations, aren't they? Okay. How many of you are 16 years old, or maybe approaching 16 years old, or probably going to be 16 years old down the road? Do you think mom and dad are going to go, you just turned 16, here's the keys to the car, let's go driving on I-15? Do you honestly think your parents are going to do that? Where do you think you're going to do that? The first time you go out in the car, where do you think you're going to go? Mom and dad are probably going to take you to the biggest, most wide open parking lot that they can find. Why are they going to do that? Anyone? Why are they taking you to a big wide open parking lot?
So you don't crash.
So you don't crash. Would you agree that there's less pressure in that situation than if I take you on I-15?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do they want you being confident behind the wheel or panicked behind the wheel? They want you confident, right? So if we look at that same sort of scenario with crossing, if you're unsure of your positioning, if you're unsure of your range, if you're unsure of just your ability to come out and deal with the ball above your head, the best way to get your confidence in doing that is unopposed crosses. And I would challenge you to have somebody, it's a friend, it's a mom, a dad, a brother, sister, a teammate, whatever, just cross some balls into you on a regular basis with no pressure and start to get that range of coming out and catching balls. At that, then you start to slowly integrate pressure. Maybe it's dummies, putting some dummies in and around the 6, 8, 10 yards out. Then it's maybe one player attacking the goal. Maybe it's two players. Then it's building in maybe a defender as well. All right. Can you see where I'm going with that? Where if we're always in a situation, the only time we're dealing with crosses is a live simulated match under full pressure, it's going to be very difficult to gain that confidence. All right. I'm not saying we don't want to do that. Yes, we obviously need to create that realism, that realistic environment, but we also have to gain some confidence in an unopposed environment. And that's something we do a lot at RSL. Then it's usually on a Thursday. If we play on a Saturday, Thursday's usually our day to get a lot of unopposed training. And then we'll build it. You know, I'll add dummies. I'll add runners. I might come out with, you know, those big NFL blocking pads, you know, where they'll be going up for a cross and I'll be pushing on them. So they're getting comfortable dealing with a bump without somebody trying to come across and win the ball. So that would be my biggest suggestion for all of you with dealing with crosses, is start with that unopposed environment first, you know, and really gain your confidence, because you're going to be able to figure out what your range is and go for everything. Try to go and catch everything in those environments, because that's when you learn what your range really is like. Okay. I would imagine on a floated ball and under full pressure, you guys are probably not going to be too confident coming out to the penalty spot to try to win a ball. But with nobody around, why wouldn't you try to see if you're comfortable with dealing with that? So does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, that was perfect. Thanks.
Okay. Now I'll ask you a question right back. What's the most important cross you're ever going to face? Tough one.
With that question, I think of two different kinds.
Okay.
So I'm trying to like narrow it down to which one. But I feel like the most important cross would be the ones that they dribble end line and they cross it in about the 6 with runners up, and the decision you make to intercept or to drop back onto your line and be ready for a save.
Okay.
That
right.
I feel like that's probably the most difficult and probably like the most common.
Yep.
But
that's a great answer. I would answer that. You might be right, but it's a little bit of a trick question. Okay.
Wait,
so
all of them are important? Is that
the
answer?
The number one answer that I would be looking for is the very first one you face. Now think about that. Okay. What if the first cross, it might be an end line cross, it might be a corner, it might be a floated ball in the box, whatever the case may be. What if the very first one that you face, you drop, you don't seem confident?
It sets your presence.
There's the presence, isn't it? So now think about that next cross. What's the center forward doing? They're crashing. What's the players serving the ball doing? They're like, get the ball to me so I can put it in the box. What if the reverse happens? That very first cross, you come out big, strong, boom, you bump into that center forward, boom. They are on the ground, you got the ball in your hands. Did you just have a direct impact on the game?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that center forward wants nothing to do with you probably. All right. And those people serving the ball are going, oh my goodness, look at this goalkeeper. I'm going to have to do something special and keep the ball away from them. Does that make sense? So the very, very first cross, I think, is the most important cross that you're going to face, because that will set the tone for the rest of the match. All right. So now you've had a direct impact on the game.
Todd, I just want to, because we're talking about size, I want to share just a quick story. This happened to me a few years ago when I first started head coaching at BYU. But, I mean, I'm not a big guy. I'm 6'1", but I'm not too thick. So as a goalkeeper, I wasn't large in stature by any means out there. And so I was never like prone to bigger goalkeepers are better. But I had an experience, I think it was my first or second year coaching. I had a goalkeeper who was 6'4", and another goalkeeper who was 5'10", and we had back-to-back games. So first game, my 6'4" keeper plays. Early in the game, a cross comes in. He comes out, picks it off. Nobody even close to him. I mean, he was so far up above everybody catching it, and it was just outside the 6 that literally the team didn't serve the rest of the game. There was not a single cross because they were like, well, that's pointless, right? No big challenge. And then the next day, played my keeper that's 5'10". Early in the game, a cross comes in, comes out, claims it well, holds it, but a guy challenged him and got pretty close to it. And so what did they do the rest of the game? They're like, okay, he caught that one and he did well, but he's going to drop one. And so we're going to keep serving it. And so it's just kind of a showcase of what you're talking about, that early cross. If you can come out and dominate that early cross and showcase that they're not going to touch it, then they're just going to think of other things that they can do, and they'll stop serving it. On a coach's side of it, it takes – I mean, if you can prevent a team from serving around your 6, life just got a lot easier preventing them from scoring, right?
Yep. That's 100% the case. 100% the case. You know, and just because you're 5'10" or smaller or whatever doesn't mean you can't dominate the box.
Sure.
You know, you guys might not remember, I'm sure Brandon will, but John Bush.
Yeah.
John Bush, I think, was probably about the same size as Nicky, but Nicky's thicker. But two things about John Bush: he could jump through the roof.
Yep.
I mean, his agility and explosiveness was incredible, and his timing for everything was off the charts. So again, it goes back to that excelling in all the other areas. You know, you can still be dominant in the cross and still be smaller in stature. So, or you could be 6'5", and what if that other physical component is, if you get bumped into, you're just falling down over. You know, you still got to be big and strong. You still got to have that ability to, just because you're 6'5", you can't rely on that big frame. You know, you still need to be agile. You still need to have some strength. You still need to be able to catch a ball. You know, you might be dominant in that one physical element of being tall, but all the other elements you struggle at, that doesn't equate to being a good goalkeeper. So you have to have a lot of different other elements as part of your toolbox, so to speak.
Awesome.
Any other questions? They're excited to get back to school, it looks like.
Right?
This should be the fun part of the day, right? It's not math class. It's not science class. This is goalkeeping class.
Who else has one? I know we got a couple out there for sure.
I've got one.
Okay.
So, like, once you, like, know your weakness, how do you, like, keep, like, build up confidence, like, in that area and, like, that space, you know?
I think the easiest way to build up confidence is to strip away any pressure that's involved in whatever that technique is. You know, it could be, say, catching the ball. Maybe you struggle catching the ball. Well, what's some easy pressure to take away to start building confidence? The pace, right? The pace of the ball that you're trying to catch. Yeah, we're all going to not be very confident. And if I put a jugs machine in front of you and crank it out at 80 miles an hour, you know, none of us are probably going to have too much confidence catching a ball. So the easy part would be tone down that jugs machine a little bit. All right. And build your confidence from there in whatever aspect it is. You know, is literally trying to strip down whatever that technique is or technical attribute that you're struggling with is, break it down to its least common denominator. What's the most simplified way I can do this, and do it that way? Then add a little bit more pressure, add a little bit more pressure, add a little bit more pressure. All right. It's the same thing with, go back to that driving a car. You know, the first time you get behind the wheel, we're not going to give you a NASCAR. You know, where are you going to probably start? You're going to go down to boondocks, and you're going to probably ride the go-karts. You know, and you're going to start with the little small ones, and then you're going to graduate to the one that's maybe a little bit faster, and then you're going to get to a little bit faster. Now you might be on a dirt track somewhere. You know, eventually you're going to be driving mom and dad's car. Then you might graduate to the NASCAR down the road, but you're not just all of a sudden just going to jump into 100 miles an hour. So I think that's the best advice I could give you. Whatever you're struggling with, break it down to its least common denominator and simplify it as much as you can and build from there. Did that answer?
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
So I have a question about how, like, Nick trained. Like, obviously he, like, was set apart in a lot of different ways, but, like, watching him train, like, what set him apart from the other goalkeepers on the team?
Nicky wanted everything with tempo. Everything was tempo. And what I mean by tempo is he wanted a lot of exercises that were like a 1-2. So it could be a volley, quickly turn, volley. but he wanted to have that rhythm all the time, you know, in his movements. You know, the other thing that really set him apart was when he had a big personality, as you probably could tell. Big personality, was always laughing, giggling, big smile on his face. But when it was time for him to work, boom, the switch just turned right on. And he could literally be having a go and a laugh and a giggle at me or one of the other goalkeepers. And boom, now it was his turn to jump in. And all of a sudden the eyes went and just focused right on the task at hand. And he had a really, really incredible ability to just boom, focus. So from a training standpoint, it was a lot of high tempo type of activities, a lot of movement, a lot of stuff right in and around his body. You know, what I call, and we would call the bubble. He wanted a lot of work in around the bubble because that was his bread and butter, because he was so quick and agile in and around his bubble. So we did a lot of work there. But man, his focus was just incredible. And I used to tell our academy goalkeepers, you know, say, look, warm-ups, come right down. You probably would see us warming up down at the far corner. And then we would gradually go into the goal. I was like, get as close as you can to us and watch him. You know, he'll do his little stretch. He'll kind of walk around, and then literally he'll step right in and boom. Then it was my cue. He's ready and let's go. And it was literally, you could almost like see him checking himself into that moment. So his focus was uncanny. But good question. I was waiting for a Nikki question to come out. Anybody else?
Charlie, you had one, didn't you? Let's have you ask yours.
Okay. So I'm 18, and I've been going to a bunch of these ID camps all across the country. And I was just wondering, or every time I go and like I'm like so close to like almost committing with these teams, but they all of a sudden decide to go with a DA goalkeeper and not like a club, because I play club. I play for Sparta. And like I was just wondering, what's the difference between club and DA? Like I've played a couple of DA teams and I don't really see the difference.
Yeah, well, first off, you're probably not going to see that very much anymore because the DA is no longer. So you probably don't have to worry about that too much anymore. But I agree with you. And when I talk to goalkeepers, I give goalkeepers different advice than I would give an outfield player. I don't always think, and for this example, let's say the DA's the top, which I'm not always sure it is, but for just an example, let's say the DA's the best you can possibly play at. For a goalkeeper, I'm not always sure playing in the best team is the best thing for your development. So the reason I would say that, and again, the reason it would be different for an outfield player is outfield players are constantly playing in the game, correct? And they want to be challenged and pressured and all those aspects. But if you're always on the best team as a goalkeeper, are you going to be pushed in the same amount? Because typically those best teams, you don't have to do too much, do you?
No.
Have you guys ever heard of the book called The Outliers? Or Outlier, I guess it's called. If you haven't, I highly recommend going on Amazon and buying The Outlier. During this pandemic and you're home alone, it's a phenomenal book to read. And it talks about the 10,000 hour rule. If you're going to be good at something, you basically have to log 10,000 hours to get to a point where you master whatever you're working on. Well, think about it in a goalkeeping aspect. If you're on the top team all the time, are you logging 10,000 hours quicker or slower than a goalkeeper that maybe is on a weaker team, but now is put into tons of situations all the time? You can see how that goalkeeper on a weaker team is going to be able to make split-second decisions quicker, and they're going to log those 10,000 hours a lot faster than a goalkeeper that's on one of the best teams. So what I would say to you is if the school or institution that you're looking at is merely going to make a decision over you or somebody else strictly based on did they play in the DA or not? Do you really want to go and play for somebody that's going to make a decision just on that purpose? That would be the question I would ask myself.
Yeah.
Do I really want to play for
probably not.
somebody like that? You know, if that's all they're looking at, because that tells me they're not looking at my ability. They're just looking about where did I play?
Mm-hmm.
So that tells me an awful lot about their knowledge of the actual position and what they're looking for.
Yeah.
To me, they're looking for more of a status symbol, all right, as opposed to the quality player.
Yeah.
And I was like that. You know, for me as an example, again, go back to me playing in the Amish country. Obviously, it was a lot different era than it is now, all right, back then. But I came and I played literally 3 months of the year, and I went on and played for a top 20 Division I school for 4, and I was a 3-year starter, and then I played professionally for like 8-9 years. And I was never on a club team. And my high school team is basically one of the teams I play for. We were awful, but somehow I went to a top 20 school, a top 20 Division I school, and played for 3 years. So I was fortunate enough to have a coach that saw something in me and took pride in me. And I love that. And I blossomed in that environment. And I think for you, it's trying to find that environment that's going to be best suited for you. And you're going to go to an institution and a coaching staff that's going to recruit you for who you are, not for who you played for.
Yeah.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
And I know it's not easy. It's fighting that stigma, but if you go into that same sort of scenario, we're talking about size, or say that goalkeeper of lack their size. It's breaking through that stigma a little bit. That I might only be 5'9", but I can still play. Well, it's the same for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you might not have played for that DA, but I tell you what, you can still play.
Yeah.
You know? And it's fighting battling through that. And when you get into those camps, those clinics, whether ID camps or ID clinics or showcases or whatever, throw away the guards and just go and play and enjoy yourself. And don't think about who you played for. Don't think about what you can do, what you can't do. Just go out, enjoy yourself, and be the best version of you possibly can. And if they're interested in you and you're good enough, they're going to take you. And they'd be a fool not to take you, all right, if you're good enough. Not just because of who you played for or who you didn't play for. So I wouldn't ever worry about that. And again, maybe that's your fuel. You know, when somebody says, oh, you didn't play for a DA, maybe that's your fuel to go out and say, you know what, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to prove to you that I'm better than that DA goalkeeper at RSL or that DA goalkeeper at LAFC or whatever. Use that as your fuel. But good question.
Okay.
That was awesome. Let's get like maybe one, maybe two more, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, it's back to homework.
Yeah.
Anyone? At least I see a couple of myself. That's always good.
Yeah,
I'll ask another one.
There you go.
Okay. So to go with my question I just asked, so you did say that there are no more DA?
The DA officially closed. Was it last week or the week before? So, and that's in the boys and the girls. There is no U.S. Soccer Developmental Academy anymore. Now, MLS has, I think within 24 hours of that announcement coming out, has basically stated that they're going to kind of take over and kind of create their own league.
Mm-hmm.
We still don't really know what that's going to entail. I have no idea.
Yeah.
So, but the actual DA is no longer.
Wow.
On the boys and girls side. Yeah, U.S. Soccer made a mess out of that whole situation, as U.S. Soccer tends to do.
Anybody else? One more goalkeeping question.
So I just recently had knee surgery and I just got cleared. So, like, what's the fastest way to, like, get back into it and recover?
First off, what was your knee surgery?
I tore my meniscus and my MCL.
Oof, tough one. I've been there. I've had 8 knee surgeries. So I know what you're going through. I've had an ACL reconstruction and 7 scopes. So I don't have very much left in my cartilage in my left knee. That's why you probably see me limping around half the time when I'm striking balls. The best advice I could give you, don't try to rush back. Follow the advice of all your physical therapists and your doctors. If they tell you to do 20 reps of something, do 20 reps. Don't do 25 and 30. If they say you're clear to do this week, only do that. Don't try to take it upon yourself. I know from a psychological standpoint, you want to get back at it and you think more is better. But when you're coming off of a knee injury, all right, and something the way you're coming off of, the internal aspects of your knee needs to heal. And you need to make sure you're strengthening those ligaments around your knee as much as you possibly can, or you're very susceptible for another injury. So I would make sure you're following the protocols that's set by your PT and your doctors to the T, and don't try to rush it. If you're doing what they are asking and you're getting stronger and they're clearing you to do more and more activity, so be it. But make sure you're not trying to do more because you think you can do it. That's, I think, when you're going to find yourself probably right back at square one. So when it's time, they're going to let you know. And they're very, very good at what they do. And if you follow the protocols, you'll be back and you'll be playing and you'll probably be stronger than ever, quicker than you probably really think. So, but follow their protocol as much as you possibly can. But ask questions. You might say, yeah, maybe I can't run, but is it okay for me to sit on my backside and have somebody volley balls at me? Don't be afraid to ask questions. Am I able to do this? At this stage of my rehab, am I able to maybe do this? Because they're going to think from a get you back to play, so to speak, as opposed to you're a goalkeeper and we deal with our hands. They're going to be thinking more of what your legs are going to be doing. All right. There could be some things. And again, ask those questions. What can I be doing with my hands? Is it okay to maybe do this or this? Or, don't be afraid to push the envelope and ask questions. All right. But that's different than you pushing the envelope and just doing it on your own without them knowing what you're doing or how you're doing it, or is your body physically ready to do it? And they're going to know and understand that. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. You'll be fine though. Those types of injuries, you're fine. I know sometimes you think, oh man, I'm never going to make it back. You'll make it back and you'll probably be stronger. And I tell you, with my ACL injury, I would never wish an ACL injury on me or on anybody, but it's probably the one thing in my life that I went through that from a psychological standpoint, I really, really learned a lot about myself during that time. So, and I think made me a much better person. So, anybody else?
Todd, I'm going to wrap you up with one more question. Looking at the RSL goalkeeper DNA and seeing the youth that are coming up, the goalkeepers that are coming up, what's the number one thing you feel like is a struggle or missing from the youth kind of developing up towards the pro ranks?
That's an easy one. Catching the ball. Catching the ball is very, very quickly becoming a lost art. I blame a lot of it on 2 things. One, what everybody perceives as the modern game where everybody's got to be able to deal with the ball at their feet. That's like, yes, I agree. We have to have that, but it's almost so overemphasized these days that we're spending more time with the ball at our feet and less time with the ball in our hands. And then the other aspect is the big trendy thing that you see right now, which is the block save or the K save, however you want to call it. That I think is overtrained. Do we need to have that in our toolbox? Yes, we have to be able to do that in situations. but it's overtrained, I think, so much now that now goalkeepers, literally their first instinct is to stand and block as opposed to catch. You know, and I look at goalkeeping as a simple position, you know, and our number one job description is keep the ball out of the back of the net. All right. For me, the easiest way to keep the ball at the back of the net is to eliminate opportunities before they ever become them.
Yeah.
And if you're just blocking a ball, well, now you got to probably make a second save.
Yeah.
Maybe a third save. If the ball's in your hands, you never have to make another save. Yeah. So I think those two things, you know, is definitely pushing ourselves into forgetting our number one job description. Make the simple save. You know, I can't stress enough to make sure you have good hands. You know, and I see a lot of our young goalkeepers in our academy, and then you kind of evaluate them up to a Nick Romano. Nick's hands were unbelievable. I mean, I sometimes I couldn't hit the ball hard enough.
Yeah.
Literally. And you look at him versus, say, some of the younger kids, and their first instinct literally is to block or push a ball. You know, try to catch the ball as much as you possibly can. Again, I'm not saying that it's not an important feature to have the ball at your feet. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we're never going to use the block save. All I'm saying is don't forget your number one thing is your hands.
That's cool. I think sometimes we get caught up in what I call like the Insta world, right? Everybody wants to make the big saves and be the Instagram, and everything you see on goalkeeping, if you go on social media, is these sessions with these upper 90 saves running across the goal. Like that's what we see constantly over and over, when reality, if you go watch a Nick Raimondo or these pros, 90% of it is pace shots to their hands. It's nothing big. It's not throwing your body around. It's just that constant repetition to make sure that's clean. So that's awesome.
Yep. And hey, if you ever want to do another call, I can show you guys. I track all of our goalkeepers' touches in every game. And basically what you just said, Brandon, 100% true. It's about 80% of the touches we make are with our feet, whether it's a back pass, a goal kick, whatever. If you take that 80% out and we just look at the saves we're going to make with our hands, 80%, it's actually a little higher than that, it's closer to 85, 86% of the saves we make are in and around the bubble of our body.
Yeah.
4% are diving saves. 4%. And yet, where do most players and where do most coaches want to train?
Big, right?
Want to train big. You know, but they forget, again, it goes back to that, can we save in the bubble? Do we have good song? Because that's where the majority of the saves we're going to make are going to be.
Right.
So doesn't it make sense if that's where the majority of the saves we're going to have to make? That should be the majority of the saves, and the focus of our training should be too.
Cool. Charlie had one quick one, if you can throw this out a little bit. As you guys are kind of on lockdown as well, and this goes for college as well, but how can keepers get seen when there's nothing going, right? Like, do you guys look at film? College coaches, are they looking at film? Is that enough for them to get seen?
You have to.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, especially in the world we're living in right now, I mean, you have to utilize the resources that we have, you know, and it's video. When you're looking at college, though, my advice would be do not wait to get recruited. You want to recruit that college almost more so than them recruiting you. So, because Brandon's that college coach, right? If you just send him one email, and that's all you send, and it might have a video, it might have your resume, it might have, you know, everything about you. But if you just send it once and you never send anything else, how quickly is he going to forget about you?
Yeah.
Plus, what does that really tell you about how interested, or tell Brandon about how interested you really are about his program? If you just have one email or one phone call versus somebody that's constantly sending him an email, you know, every time he's going to a tournament, he's sending updated video, he's sending information, you know, of his upcoming tournaments, you know, here's some training video, and it's constant. that tells him exactly what he wants to know. All right, that you really have a vested interest in that institution. So I definitely recommend recruit them more than they're going to recruit you, and market yourself. And part of that marketing is video. And in a day and age like we are right now, that's basically all we got. We can't go to a tournament and watch you play. All right. So the only thing we have is video. I would do something kind of short, sweet, to kind of pique their interest a little bit. All right. But I would also do some training. I know when I was in the college game, I wanted to see players train, and typically when I would go and watch games, I might go and watch you play 10 minutes in a game, but I spent 20 minutes watching you warm up, because I knew more about you in the 20 minutes of warm up than I might have done for the 90 minutes of a game, So don't be afraid to also show training video, because you're just going to see more repetitions. I'm going to see more about your personality and your training habits in a training environment. How do you react when you make a mistake? Don't just put a highlight reel and it's all big top corner saves. I want to see the nuts and bolts. So I think definitely use video and follow that video up with emails, phone calls. Don't be afraid to call. They can talk to you all day long. It doesn't matter what division, as long as you're initiating the contact. So, well, Division III. I mean, I used to coach Division III. I could call you all day long every day, but definitely market yourself. So, and I'll tell you, if I can ever be a resource, in that regard, let me know. Okay. You'd be amazed, and Brandon would probably vouch for this. The soccer world is very, very small.
Yeah,
it's very, very small. And odds are, Brandon probably knows somebody at an institution, or knows somebody that knows somebody at an institution that you want to go to, or I do, or somewhere down the line. It's a very, very small community. And if we can help each other, I'd be more than happy to help any one of you.
So I have another question going with what you said was, so I've been sending emails like once every week. There you go away. Okay.
Yep,
once like every week, and like calling him once a week. And I just feel like with this whole pandemic thing, like, I just feel like they're like saying like they don't need to work, or they don't need to answer. And so I haven't gotten like any response. And right before the whole pandemic, I was going to go to National League, and I was going to have 4 college coaches watching me down in Las Vegas, but then it got canceled. And then also regionals got canceled and nationals. So that's really what I'm concerned about right now. And like, I've been emailing, I've been calling, and no response.
Yeah. And that's the frustrating part. And we're in a different world right now, and I wish I had, the magic ball answer for you, for it, but we're all learning day to day. Odds are, look at Brandon, Brandon's not in his office right now. He's at home, so I don't know if he's able to, get his voicemails if you're calling his office number. Maybe they don't have access to it. Emails, they probably do. But we're all in a situation right now where we're trying to figure out what's going on in the world. Where are we in the world, and how are we going to manage ourselves through this new world, so to speak? So you might find that, they have maybe shut down a little bit and kind of halted their recruiting process, because they're just trying to manage and get through the day-to-day life right now. So I know it's frustrating, but it's something that you have to keep on battling through. Eventually you're probably going to hear something, and it could be something like, hey, you know what, we're not interested. Well, then you at least have your endpoint. You have the period at the end of the sentence, and you can move on somewhere else. But if you have a vested interest in one of those schools and you haven't heard from them, keep on trying. Try to find out maybe another number for them. Again, if you're doing that and I'm that college coach, what are you essentially telling me? You're communicating to me that you really are interested in my institution. And I would be a fool to not look at you. If you're that interested in going to the school that I coach at, I'd be foolish to not at least say, you know what, I'm going to take a hard look at you. I'm going to watch your video. because you really want to be here and you want to be part of what we're doing here at this school. So keep on going. I know it's not easy, but and I tell my kids this, and they get sick and tired of me hearing me say it. If you want something bad enough, you'll find a way. And right now you're trying to find your way. And if you want that to go to that school bad enough, you'll figure out a way to try to contact that coach, or figure out, okay, who knows that coach? Who do I know that maybe has a contact to try to get word to that coach? Just keep on going and don't take no for an answer. Really don't, because that'll say an awful lot about your personality. And that's something that I think that social aspect is something that is undervalued in that recruiting process. It's not just about, can you do everything well, but what type of person are you? And I can guarantee if I ask the question to Brandon, does he want a bad seed in his program at BYU? The answer is probably no. I'd rather have a less accomplished player that actually has a backbone to him, has morals, and has good values, and is just a good person, than the best player that he could potentially get, but it's just a nightmare of a person. And for 4 years now, he's got to deal with a problem. So be that good person and try to figure out a way. It's not easy. I'm sure Brandon, he's a college coach. He can probably tell you the process of recruiting right now is completely different than it was 3 months ago. So I'm sure he's still learning, okay, what's this new process going to be? And it almost changes daily, just like our lives. And he might be able to give you a little bit of advice on that, because he's in the trenches there with that, of being that college coach and trying to manage the recruiting process right now.
To be honest, Charlie, it's a rough one, because every coach right now is just wondering if they're going to have a season in the fall, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the biggest issue. It's not what players I'm going to have. It's, are we going to have a season? And once that kind of evens out, then all the player stuff's going to pick back up drastically, and it's going to happen very, very fast, because everybody's going to be on their heels running at, okay, well, we're going to have a fall season. This is when it starts. We need to make sure everything's ready for it. So everybody's just kind of waiting. It's a big waiting game right now over the next couple of weeks to see what we have. I'm sure Todd's in the same spot with when the season's going to start. When is preseason going to start? When can we train? So it's just a really big waiting game. So like you said, just keep going at it. They're going to get it, and then once everything takes off, everything will happen very fast at that point.
Okay.
What year are you?
I'm a senior.
Oh, seriously.
And I've been trying for this whole past year, even half a year in sophomore or junior, I mean. And just right before during sophomore and half of junior year, I was in an injury, so I couldn't really do much. But all of the summer and half of junior year, and then all of this year, I've been just talking to coaches. I've been going to their ID camps, residential camps. And like I was saying before, I went to North Carolina, and all they really wanted was just a DA, and same with University of Portland, and they just wanted a DA. And I'm like I was at the camp, but I feel like I'm the best player here, or the best goalkeeper, and I have potential, and you really don't want me. And Wake Forest, they were actually interested in me, and they were going to commit me, but they had enough. They didn't need another goalkeeper for 2020. And so, yeah.
Well, and here's another thing that I would say is you've also got to think about, and all the schools you mentioned, very, very good schools.
Mm-hmm.
Not only from an academic standpoint, but from a playing standpoint. Don't write off some of the other maybe mid-major Division I schools, lower-end Division I schools, or D2 or D3. Because what you got to remember is, if you go to a Wake Forest, you go to a Portland, you go to a North Carolina, are you happy being maybe a starter for 1 year, 2 years, versus maybe going to a mid-major and you're a 4-year starter, and you walk in as a freshman and maybe can start. So, but that's something that I can't answer, Brandon can't answer, your parents can't answer. That's something that you've got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, yes, maybe I can play there. But looking at their depth chart, I might not really have the chance until maybe my junior year. And maybe that's what you want. That's awesome, but that's a decision you have to make. Your lifelong dream might be to play at North Carolina, and 1 year as a starter, your senior year that's good for you. But you also might be like, you know what, I'd like to be a big fish in a small pond, so to speak, and be a 4-year starter at a mid-major or a lower Division I, or even a Division III school, and be a stud and be an All-American. So don't just kind of pigeonhole you to that top restaurant.
Yeah, for sure.
Look at all the other aspects and look at yourself. And when I talk about the college recruiting process, the first question I ask kids to ask themselves, and don't laugh when I say this, is how far are you willing to be from mom and dad? And I know all of you right now are like, oh, God, I want to get as far away from mom and dad as I possibly can. But realistically, think about that. You're from Utah, right?
Yeah.
So going to North Carolina, unless your mom and dad are super, super wealthy, are they going to every one of your games?
No.
Probably not. Are you
4
maybe
years,
coming
my
up?
parents saw one game of mine in 4 years.
Wow.
And that's something you got to ask yourself. You really have to ask yourself that question, I think. And from an honest standpoint, not, I just want to get away from them. Do you want to live close enough that you can bring home some laundry on a weekend and get a home cooked meal? You go to North Carolina, probably not happening. You're probably coming home for Christmas, and that's probably about it.
Yeah.
So those are aspects you really have to dig deep and think about, and you've got to think about how far am I willing to be from mom and dad? Do I want them to have the ability to come to see me play? I know for me, that was huge for me. I wanted them to be able to see, and I wanted them far enough away that they couldn't come every weekend and see me. But I wanted close enough that I knew if I needed to get home, I could go home and I could see them on a weekend. I could bring some laundry home. I could get mom to cook me a nice meal, and they could still come to the majority of my games. That was for me. And again, I can't make that decision for you. Brandon can't make that decision either. That's something that you've got to really look deep inside you and say, what do I really want? How far do I want to be? And do I want to be a stud for 4 years at a school, or maybe have the opportunity to play 1 year? That's something you really have to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Brandon?
I agree with that. Yes, very much. Especially the culture we live in here. It's a very tight-knit kind of bubble. So, I came from Texas, so, but yes, very much.
Yeah.
I feel for you, man. I really feel for you. Any of you other seniors that are out there right now, I feel for you. You're missing out on, arguably 2 or 3 your best months of your high school, or all of your undergraduate, career. It's a fun time, and I feel for you. You're missing out. You're missing out on the prom. You're missing out, seeing your friends and graduation and all that. On top of all this stuff that you're talking about right now, and those final pieces to the recruiting process, and I feel for you. If there's things that I can do to help, I'll do whatever I can. I'm sure Brandon will do the same. But you'll get through this. It's not going to be easy. It's not easy for any of us, but stay positive, and we'll all get through this, and you'll be where you deserve and where you're supposed to be come the fall.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Todd, it's awesome. Privilege having you on, man. We are blessed to have you with us today.
No problem. Well, thanks for having me, guys. I will, before I kind of sign off here, I'm trying to think, where's the chat? I will put my email. This is my personal email. If you guys ever have a question about anything, feel free to shoot me an email. If I can help, I will help. All right. I will do whatever I possibly can to help. So feel free. Don't be shy. You can reach out to me. Brandon knows how to get in touch with me as well. So, but yeah, best of luck to y'all. And if you see me at a RSL game, make sure you wave, say hello. Love to see you, and keep working hard.
Will do. Todd, thanks again. Thanks for everybody for joining.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. Thank you.
Talk to you soon. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.